Recording in progress.
All right, good morning. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, November 20th meeting of the Lower Southern Township Board of Supervisors and ask everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. That brings us to our first public comment and only on the public comment on the work session agenda. Is there anyone wishing to be recognized? Seeing no one, we'll move on for the approval of the work session meeting minutes from November 6th, 2024 and October 16th, 2024. Are there any questions? Comments or edits?
I'll make a motion to approve both. I will second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those say nay. Motion carries. Public Works Director, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Update on some projects, Verde Mill Road Bridge. HEK continues with the demolition of the existing structure. The old structure is down at this point, at least a portion of it. So they're continuing to work on that project. Roberts Road Bridge, no progress that I'm aware of at this point. Have not heard anything more from the county on their final design plans. Yoder Road sidewalk, I met with two property owners that have trees that are in the way of the proposed path or within the right of way. I met with both property owners about removing the trees, and both are in agreement. So at this point, we're moving forward with the final design of that project, so that everything, the entire sidewalk will be within the existing right of way. So that's good.
Excellent.
Thank you for having this conversation.
Problem. Main Street sidewalk, waiting to hear from our solicitor regarding their discussions with Smile Realty and their involvement in the project, so we've gotta keep that project moving. As far as some grant projects, the 63 and 113 signal modernization, that work is completed. Got a PennDOT final inspection of the signal scheduled for next week, and then that will begin the 30-day test to hopefully complete the project by the end of the year.
That is now online in the system. Question.
I'm not sure.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
So before we get that thing final, we want to make sure, certain it's in the system.
Okay. Yeah, I will verify with
Thank you.
Higgins and Bowman.
It's not hooked up to Centrex now. How is the traffic running on a cycle?
Not good.
That's what I meant.
It remains not good
Even
at times.
I know there were issues previously, before they had all the pieces in place. There was some traffic backup, but I haven't been through the intersection recently.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know if the police have been experienced the backups. I try to avoid it during the day, but off peak, I will tell you that it dwells on 63 unnecessarily.
Okay.
So I know it's not in the system.
Okay.
Yeah, we still need confirmation on the LPRs that they're installed. So that final.
That was good.
The 2025 Green Lake Go grants are submitting scoping forms this week to PennDOT, and this is for the modernization of signals at Main and Walmart and Main and Cole. Those two signalized intersections. Just some department activities, Groff Mill Road, we protected and armored the road shoulder there just below Shakespeare to prevent on the roadway. Park Avenue Fields did a lot of work there with aerating, top dressing, overseeding, fertilizing for both of those fields. And today we're going to be installing growth blankets that we purchased to try to facilitate, the growth during the winter months. The plan is for the girls across to use those fields in the spring. Drainage improvements and curb repair at Ruth Road and Eastwoods Road. There was damaged curbing, an opportunity for us to extend the pipe to make it a little safer, make it a little nicer. So we took advantage of that. We're also working on correcting a water bleed out problem on Old Skipback Road coming down the hill towards Groff's Mill. There's several locations we have high groundwater table and a lot of rain, which we haven't had obviously, but when that does happen, the water bleeds out of comes up out of the road and runs down the road and creates an icing condition, so we're correcting that while we have an opportunity. Also, we're getting ready for winter operations. And the last item for you is a resolution 2024-19. For your consideration, this is to authorize submission of the statewide local share account grant application. And this would be for the police impound garage and for the covered car canopy. The grant amount is $1 million. The project estimate is a little over that.
1.139 million.
Yes. And talking with the estimate was developed by Boyle Construction. And it's essentially the similar concept to what was previously presented to the board. Which there are some opportunities if the grant doesn't come in at $1 million, because the Commonwealth Financing Authority tends to have to spread the wealth. So maybe everybody gets a little bit instead of exactly what they want. So if the grant doesn't come in, if we don't receive anything, the full $1 million, then and receive something less, it gives us an opportunity to do some value engineering and decide on different styles or different components that maybe we can eliminate or reduce or do more cost effectively to match the grant award. So at this point, the concept is to apply for the full amount, see what happens, and then we can always scale back if need be as we move forward. So that's for your consideration.
We discussed in the past, the different options, like the cost cut side, like the idea of going for the.
Yeah.
Um,
Ask for it all and see what we get.
Yeah. I'd make a motion to approve resolution 2024-19.
I'll second. Before we do that, I think it needs should we make sure we say and canopy as well on there? Perhaps it's for the agenda.
Well,
but
yeah,
but I noticed on here for the agenda purposes and the canopy. Okay, thank you. Second.
you can't second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. That's all that I have. Answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Jones? Right, hearing nothing, we'll move on. Chief Medwin.
One quick update and then also a brief update. Executive session. Yesterday we had a gas leak where just after 3 o'clock. Apparently digging where it should have been safe, but the markings were incorrect. Brief evacuation of a couple of buildings, but within like an hour's time, they were out and back in. People came out. Good ending.
Good day to be outside.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's all I have.
Well, yeah, any questions for the chief? All right, moving on, building and zoning, Mr. Buki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this brief as well. The department update, we've issued 41 permits so far this month. We've actually matched or just slightly exceeded the amount of permits that were issued in all of last year. So everything from now to the rest of the year will be in addition to what we did last year, so we're year than last year. So we do not have a zoning hearing board for December. And our upcoming planning commission is actually the joint planning commission. That's the December 11th joint November-December meeting. And we have the proposed right-of-way amendments that we spoke about previously. That's on the agenda. And there is a property over in Burnfield on Moorwood and Fallowfield. That is technically it's a minor subdivision. There's one lot. They're proposing 2 lots. The home, the existing house is actually in Upper Southford Township, 279 Fallowfield. And they own the corner. They own out to the corner of Moorwood and Fallowfield. So that's what they subdivide. And the last thing on my agenda here is 773 President Road resubmission, and Judith and Rick are here to present.
Mike, just short question, quick question. The application that had withdrawn from the zoning hearing board several months ago by letter at golf course, let's check this.
They have not resubmitted. I haven't heard anything.
Thank you.
Mr. Mast, Ms. Stanko, you're up.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning, Rick.
Morning, Rick.
I think you've met Judith.
Yep.
Franco. Sitting here, I have a handout. This is a lot in the Tuttle subdivision, which was approved earlier in the year, and if you recall, it was a flag lot configuration, and one of the initial waivers, sorry, Joe, I'm at the last one here. With the subdivision was the ratio, length to width of the flag lot. And it's deeper than it is wide. And one of the reasons for that was, it's preserving as many trees as possible. So that's the configuration of the lot. Now we're at the point where we're trying to go for a building permit for the Dankos, and the same issues are there. What I tried to do is give you some progression over time. Let's look at the first page first so you can see what the extent of the relief is. There's a triangle, and you can see it on the board that's shaded of the garage, a portion of the garage that goes in front of the flag lot only setback. And for some reason, several years ago, all flag lots in the township are now required to have 25% greater setback in the subdivision ordinance than other lots. In the R1A, it's important, I think, to note that there's already a 75-foot front yard setback and a 75-foot rear yard setback. So the closest under the zoning that two homes could be is 150 feet. With the additional 25%, it's almost 200 feet of separation. That's different than the other districts where that same standard may apply. What's also unique in this case is that the front house, the lot in front of it, is all the way toward the street. So there's a considerable distance between this lot and the house in the front. And I would say the only person that would be impacted by that would be Mr. Tuttle, who sold the lot and who has already submitted a letter saying he has no issue with holding this front. As you go through the photos, you can see the first photo is from 1992. None of this was even wooded at that time, and it was just left to become overgrown. I know some of these photos aren't great in the way they printed, but if you go to the third sheet, 2002, you can see how some of that area where the house is started to be left to be not maintained, and it basically grew up in very heavy brush and undesirable vegetation. There were no trees in there. You couldn't even get into the property today to get back there. All the trees are to the rear. Those are the trees we're trying to preserve to the greatest extent possible. You go to the last one, that's actually as it exists today. So by the air, it's kind of hard to tell what it really is unless you really look at the progression through time. It is basically junk in there. And that's where we want to put the house and try to keep as many of the larger trees in the back as possible. There's a lot of ash back there which have died, but even if they're cleared out, there's still a considerable canopy back there. The other factors that go into this are the placement of the septic system. The tested lot is, kind of in the middle of the lot. So we're trying to maximize the separation for the septic system. And we're also trying to preserve as much area for a replacement system if it ever becomes necessary. So the end result is when you consider all of the unique circumstances around this, it makes sense to preserve the trees. It actually is in the ordinance that should be a primary concern, is preserving existing vegetation. It's in the subdivision and land development ordinance with regard to preservation of trees. And it's also one of the primary considerations with regard to flag lots. So we're trying to adhere to that. But we're trying to do the best job we can in laying out the lot, which I think has no impact on anybody. We're not asking for relief from the side yard setbacks. We're only asking for the front yard, and it's a minimal amount, but it makes a big difference in the overall layout of the house. The secondary component, the request, is to allow the calculation for tree disturbance to be based on canopy area. And even if you do that as most conservatively as possible, which is to count all of that overgrown, undesirable brush as wooded area, we're still under the 25% in the allowed tree disturbance. We're really, in reality, much less than that, because there really are no trees in the area over 8 inches in caliber that we're clearing. It's just thick overgrowth. It's a lot of survey effort to go in there and tabulate every tree just to prove that out. I think from the aerial photographs, and I could send these out electronically to Michelle or to Mike, to where they're a little bit clearer, kind of proves that out as well. So that's the basis of the request. I don't know if you have any questions.
On the grading plan, Rick,
Yeah.
where's stormwater management going?
Well, first of all, I don't think stormwater management's required because it's in the Skip Act Creek.
Okay.
So it's
If you
not
don't,
regulated.
if you don't have it, then you don't have any disturbance related to it.
Correct.
Okay.
Not a
We
regular,
have required something from,
not according to the ordinance.
for every new home, we've had stormwater. If it's a new bill.
Okay, then not what the ordinance says, so. The ordinance says the regulated activity is 1 acre or more of earth disturbance, and that's what generates stormwater management. So. If we did stormwater management, it would likely be above that driveway pipe, so all the drainage for the driveway area, which is most of the impervious drains to a low point at the driveway pipe. So we would do some sort of a control there,
Okay.
but that's not what the ordinance requires.
And my other, and I appreciate the argument. We appreciate having an actual footprint of the house, which is what we had talked about last time, so it wasn't talking in hypotheticals. If the relief is not granted, what is the additional disturbance that will occur? So what are we saving by granting the relief?
You're saving disturbance of where the trees are, basically. So
That's assuming they're gonna build the exact same house.
that is the house they're building, yes.
Okay.
So if you move it back, you also have to move it to the right because of the location of the septic system, which at this point is immovable. So it only pushes all of those improvements further back. And you can see the grade gets steeper as it goes back as well. So there's also, the least amount of impact to grade where the house is. So the further you move it back, the further you move it to the right, the greater the impact is as you go back. And I would ask it the question a different way. What would be the benefit in that, in doing that? There really isn't a benefit in doing that. There's only the disturbance of additional trees. There's no negative aspect to keeping the house where it's proposed.
Other than the subdivision land development ordinance doesn't allow it.
That's correct. It requires a waiver.
Right.
And if we grant this waiver, then we have to pretty much have to grant for everybody that comes in here.
No, you
That's the
don't,
whole-
because there's a unique circumstance surrounding this
And
lot.
that's what I'm trying to get to, is what is the truly unique circumstance?
The lot has trees in the back, not in the front. We're putting it where the trees are not. We're respecting the septic system testing area. We're trying to preserve as much additional area for septic testing. It just makes sense in this particular case.
Mr. Massey, you said for some reason we have setbacks. One of the reasons I've learned, at least in this capacity, why we have setbacks and why these things go into place. It wasn't just, let's just throw some setbacks. One of the reasons could be argued that in this district, and we live in this township, it makes our township more desirable, more aesthetic pleasing, or, our type of flag lots. Obviously, the only impact would be Mr. Tuttle, and he did send a letter that said he's okay with it. But one could also argue that when he was here, he isn't going to keep that lot. So the new person coming in would then have to have that. then again, that person coming in would be purchasing it, so they know what they're getting.
They know exactly what they were getting, yeah.
They would know what they're getting. However, again, we have an exception. Preserving trees is, you said, is in the best interest and consistency. That is something that is important. That's why another way we could do that would have been to create a smaller house. That is another option that could have been done. I understand what you guys are saying. I'm moving up. I appreciate that you're conserving trees. My issue is, and one thing too, I agree with Mr. Canavan. I really like seeing the plans. Thank you, Mr. Dingle, bringing those plans as well. But this isn't my specialty as well. So one could say, well, is this an unnecessary hardship that maybe the zoning hearing board should take a look at to
It's not
determine?
a zoning, it's not a zoning.
Okay, fair enough. So for fair enough with this as well, is this the hardship? Do we want to go ahead and move this? When it comes to the trees, I know one of the reasons is cost, and I don't see that as a reason, as something that we have these standards here. That was written in there. One of the concerns was cost. Moving it up as in, go back to what Mr. Shern said, is this something that we want to do all the time? We could argue that this is unique. I'm okay. I could be okay with conversation, moving it a little forward as long as everything is, again, we're preserving the trees. I see that somebody else is coming in. I don't feel comfortable with the tree waiver though as well. And I would feel more comfortable if this would say, go to our planning commission or have some more expertise talking on it from our townships.
I have some heartburn. My heartburn begins in September when Mr. Buki sent out a memorandum. You were not copy. Ms. Danko was that there was this issue of waivers afoot, and specifically the things that would be required normally, and the waiver requests that came about. We then received a letter in October, and Ms. Danko also came in to speak to us. And I think at the time we were fairly clear on what we were looking for. And even today, while you're saying you're preserving trees, we really don't know the size and magnitude of those trees because a survey, at least of the trees that were going to be disturbed, has not been done. Then last week, I drive by and the front end of the lot is basically denuded. So again, flying in the face of our ordinances and our requests is probably not going to garner a lot of favor. But with that being said, in order to grant relief, I think it would be important for the board to know what true relief we're granting. And I still don't know, what are the size and magnitude and type of trees? I know generally, certainly, and I've seen the aerials and I've looked across the lot from the road myself. So I get that, but it's still somewhat nebulous, at least in my mind. So if I'm going to grant relief, I'd really like to know what the relief it is that I'm granting.
That, and looking at that drawing right there, you turn that building clockwise 1 hour, negates the whole problem. Right? That all of a sudden it won't be in the setback. So I don't see.
You're saying bring the upper left corner of the house
Just turn it
towards the
from the
setback.
center of gravity there, turn it one hour. Then it pushes that whole corner back. I don't see this being that giant a problem that we have to have it exactly right there.
And if that's a possibility to do, get the correct driveway, all that done, then again, there's another reason why we can still preserve trees in other ways.
Move the building towards the top of the draw.
Well, and that's just so I'm clear also, I believe when we approved the Tuttle subdivision, there's a note on the plan that the individual lot owners are responsible for their tree counts, correct?
That's correct.
So regardless, really the issue of the waiver of the setback is separate from
Correct.
this discussion of trees, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying about the trees. There are other less expensive ways to go about doing a tree survey that I know have been accepted in the township. You do 100 by 100 area, you do other things rather than counting every single tree to get to a reasonable number.
Well, that's what we're asking for. We're asking for that type of consideration here. We don't want to go in
And I think that's
survey
something that's generally
locate 3.5
worked out
acres.
with Michelle. I think that's something that you have that conversation with Michelle. If it's a, and that obviously works if it's a pretty consistently wooded lot, which this is, that generally is a fair assessment.
It's not wooded where that, so, no, just for your information, Keith, I did speak with Mike McCullough, who's the guy who did the work that's been done in there. And not a single tree has been taken out, except ones that were already down or dead. So he would be willing to make that statement if needed. So you could not even get into this
They
property
cleared
before.
scrub is what,
Absolutely. Not one single tree was his, statement to me. So
I think your best way to get the tree issue resolved would be probably a meeting with Michelle. To either in the field or whatever to say, okay, here's where the house is gonna go, here's the septic system is, this is the heavily wooded area.
And
We can do 110, 100 by 100 area, this is scrub, document it, and then she'll put a letter in that says, hey,
That satisfies.
this satisfies that requirement.
yeah, I think that would be an easy documentation.
Right.
The real request is not to have to survey locate 3.5 acres of trees out there to prove that, to
I don't
prove
think
that
that's an
out.
unreasonable request, in my opinion, because I know that's been accepted
Yeah,
in the township.
and I know the
From
reality
Michelle's
is we're
line.
not even close to that 25% in reality, so.
Yeah, my suggestion would be, have that conversation. I would go to the planning commission and ask them for their recommendation on the relief. And
Or the setback.
for the setback, they approved the subdivision. If that had been, that could have easily been one of the things that was on the original subdivision plan. It wasn't because we didn't know the house, understood, but it's still a waiver from our land at our saldo, which is traditionally reviewed by the planning commission and a recommendation is made.
Now that said, though, I am cautious of waivers, and one of the reasons on one of them was because of cost. And I mean, if you're buying something, we have a reason for its cost, so that's one thing I'm cautious with. I just want to put that out there, if that's the only reason. I agree, I think it should go to the planning commission, get more Michelle's feedback, more, as I said, more of our townships. Feedback.
And on the tree count, there are multiple ways to do a tree count. So I don't think it's just necessarily a thought. There's actually just it's a generally accepted practice that I don't think is unreasonable.
You're not suggesting planning commission for that issue though, right? The tree count.
I think that you need to, if Michelle is willing to accept that to satisfy the condition, I think that's fine, because that's
Okay.
generally the agency in our township who has
Okay.
handled that.
Okay.
Okay,
I got it.
All right,
thank you.
thanks.
I think you ought to reconsider the 25-foot setback flag lot set, really.
Yeah, we're gonna put it in zoning.
We could always reconsider that.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
No, I mean,
But it's, I've had this situation, same thing, it's in their zoning and for, I'm not sure what the ultimate goal is, but it doesn't always have good results.
I don't know where they were. Other than you
You
don't
know,
want
wasn't
the
there,
house.
and now there's a lot of flag lots out there that don't.
But these are R1A, these are big lot at the beginning.
that's where I think the problem comes down to is, to me, it's a really good idea when you're in a smaller lot zoning
Oh,
district. Because of,
yeah, that's
when
exactly
you're
right.
stacking
Yeah,
houses on
basically.
top of each other, you want to space it. R1A is a slightly different thing, but it was a universally adopted ordinance, so it is what it is. I mean, something that can be looked at some point, but
I'm
at
curious.
this point, this is what we have.
Yeah, I'm curious to see the reason. And again, I agree, it could be for aesthetic reasons, I mean, make this township more desirable, but every reason that I've seen goes through a process, just throw it out there, so.
All right,
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Jude.
Thank you for your time.
All right, anything else for Mr. Buki? You're done. Okay, Mr. Jakowski, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, the updated expiring appointment list for you. As you know, any point that says yes has responded to our communication to see if they would desire to be reappointed.
Dave, just ignore you.
I did.
Relentless.
Yes, we haven't heard back yet. There is one change.
Are you still a yes, Dave? Okay,
Uh,
not to put you on the spot, but I'm.
Jean Campbell asked not to be reappointed to the Communications Committee and as the alternate to the zoning hearing board. So
She's on the police committee also?
she wasn't on the regular.
A regular tenant, so she, okay.
Was she official?
No, she wasn't officially on it.
That's just an extra norm.
So that will be, something we'll be reaching out to folks. Folks with interest, we'll also reach out to folks who recently applied.
I was gonna say, are we gonna send out sort of, hey, these are the opportunities, please let us know what you might be interested in?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
That's excellent.
I just want to say, since we mentioned Kate as well, just to thank her for her service, and not just on the communications committee, and we feel this way, I know with everybody, warrant, so I thank everybody who has given their time and if they don't continue, really appreciate it. I'm sure the rest of the board feels that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Echo those thoughts.
Gene has been very dedicated.
The next item on the agenda is the ordinance 2024-06, it's authorizing grant participation loan. Jamie Schlesinger is here from PFM. They have gone out and solicited bids for the loan, and he is here to speak to you about what he's.
according to my email, he's done an excellent job, but I'll let you.
I'll be brief then. We are going thanks everybody for having, obviously, we didn't have all the answers last time I was here, but we went through detail about why we're doing it. Everything we expected to happen. We received proposals from 6 banks, and the goal was to have both good interest rate, full flexibility, and relative reasonable costs from the bank. And all those 3 of those things happened. We received proposals from various banks. They ranged pretty wide, I should point out. That is not uncommon in this market just because of uncertainty and just banking values, different reasons. So I'm going to point to 3 different pages for today. Page 3 of the document, turn it sideways. This is just a summary of the proposal we received. M&T Bank was the best proposal. It's not hard to analyze that when you look at the interest rate. They offered a 3.98% fixed for the full term. There's a bank fee of $2,500. We funded as part of the transaction. And I think the most important point of this is it's prepayable anytime without penalty. So, one of the conversations we had was it was possible we get a fixed rate from another bank and have, certain requirements of dates or, percentages of premium or.
Like the
penalty.
Webster one.
Right, exactly. You'd have to make a decision here. In this case, we got everything. We got the low rate under 4%. We got the full flexibility, and that's what. So very easy. The bank obviously has been pretty active. Actually, walked out a few minutes ago. I'm doing a settlement with M&T right now for another client. So they're certainly trying to be aggressive in this market in general. So worked out well for the township. So I won't go through the others, but you can see, the ranges, probably 2% difference between the high and the low, which is just unreal.
This is a full drawdown though, right?
This is not drawdown. That's
And this is, we take the full amount at settlement, if we
Yes.
don't get to draw it down.
That's correct. That's a good point, but as we talked about the past, the value of drawdown really isn't that much these days because you're gonna take that money, put it into an account, probably gonna earn about this, you're allowed to
You know what
earn.
we get from Pliget or anything?
Look at your over 5%.
Pliget is more than this.
Yes. Because more
We
than-
borrow a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, make money. Yeah, make money. Jamie.
Okay, the market's gonna move, so if you start out earning above, and then, let's say the Fed drops 100 basis points and you're below, it's the blended average that ultimately matters. So stick the money in the account, spend it for the project, and we'll figure out the difference.
Okay, let's deal with it.
Right, we'll figure that out. So that's in there. So what does that mean? Again, what we saw from the previous pages on page 4. The blue section is we borrow the $7,445,000 at settlement. It gets put into the account. You start paying interest from day 1 at 3.98%. Because we're structuring this as that wraparound debt service structure from an incremental debt service, your budgeted debt service for 25 will go from $1.3 million to about $1.6 million. So you'll be budgeting about $300,000 more, and you'll do that for a few years until you start paying down principal. So we can decide how we handle all that as the money comes in from grants. But that's the anticipation of if no grants show up, that's what your payments will look like. The yellow is an illustrated philosophical conversation that if you receive all the money we expect in some capacity, it all happens by December of 27. We pay down the principal at the end, and that would shorten up the term, reduce the interest amount eventually. And you can see that the initial amounts are around the same for the first couple of years because you have to screw all the money, but it shortens the amortization by several years. And of course, the total interest expense gets dropped. So all good news all around. It should give us all the flexibility we want, strong interest rate, and get your projects done. Just
And Joe, our budget for 25, we recognize the income from the additional interest on.
Yes, what I'll
that.
do is, a slight change to the budget advertisement is not enough to have to re-advertise is, will show the expense out of the general fund, but the transfer from the capital to the general to pay up that difference between.
Correct, but are we showing the income from the interest?
Yes.
Okay, that interest income will go into capital.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So page 5, again, will be similar to what I sent you last week. That's what the amortization schedule is. Again, very little principal in the first couple of years while you're doing construction, and then it kind of hits when your other debt falls off. That makes the assumption they'll pay out of principal. And then finally, page 6, this is the sources and uses of funds. You guys have seen it 1,000 times. The expectation here is assuming you move forward with the ordinance. Chris will do all the filing with DCED, and we'll settle on December 19th, and that's when the funds will be available. So we'll get everything teed up, ready to go, and then all that happens on the 19th is when it gets prepared. Payment cost, and then I said finally, but I didn't really mean it. Page 7 is really your overall debt summary. So when you look at this, this is what you guys should be budgeting in total debt, broken out by different funds, as you guys know. Cover everything with your general fund, but ultimately it's broken out by golf and other things, but that's how this is all broken down. That's all I got. The balance is really just the proposal we received and backup information. So I'll let Chris hop in and talk about the ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I get a quick question here?
Oh, sure.
Joe, this is actually maybe more for you. It's my understanding that we had grant covering the cost of all the projects, but it seems with the presentation that the principal loan exceeds the grant amounts by over 1.5 million. I guess I'm asking is, what will the excess loans proceeds, how will the excess loans proceeds be allocated? What do we?
There's no, they do not exceed,
They do not exceed.
they exceed the project cost.
The project cost.
So-
That's what I was.
No,
The
the
grant amount.
grants are. It's what you're
Grant is
seeing,
five.
what we received is 80% of the cost of the project. We're taking the entire cost and then just amortizing that out, but we'd be paying that 20% anyway, so we're just paying it to the bank.
And then I guess the other one was curious, like how the township will pay back the excess funds and interest. The amount is roughly, and correct me if I'm wrong, $3.25 million over the expected grant proceeds. Excuse me, if we would pay the loan over the entire proposed time. Is that correct?
25%.
When we have, how are we planning, and you were saying it's going to the general fund, how are we planning on paying back the funds and the excess funds and interest from this?
With the reimbursement grants and then
That's what I wanted
with
to double check.
municipal funds for the coverage of the 20%. Because generally the grants are 80-20%.
Right.
So the township funds will pay that 20% portion and the grants will pay the 80% portion. And they'll be used to pay back the loan.
Okay.
And the interest expense is paid by the investment income we'll get from plopping that 7 million plus proceeds into Pliget. We'll earn back the interest while we work through the project.
So to the taxpayer, we've got grants at 80%. Township was on the hook for 20%.
Always.
Always, and the cost through interest and everything else is offset. So this is a beautiful situation, couldn't be more perfect financially, in my eyes.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Kudos to everyone getting the grants, because that's the key part.
Yeah.
That's the heavy lift, it is. All right, Chris, your turn, your next.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. You've heard Jamie's presentation, so I don't need to belabor the ordinance itself. The ordinance is the document that authorizes a borrowing for $7,445,000 and awards the note that the township had issued to M&T Bank, consistent with their proposal at a 3.98% interest rate. The ordinance has been reviewed by Joe and commented by him and by Andy. And what it does is, in the short form of the document itself, the first 7 pages or so, authorizes debt, authorizes the award to M&T, sets out some federal tax covenants, hits the different marks that the state requires under the Local Government Unit Debt Act in terms of authorization of officers and other actions consistent with the debt authorization. There is a pledge of your local taxing power, but we've also included the pledge of the grants as they come in. And as Jamie said, getting this award from M&T that allows prepayment at any time allows you to really manage those dollars and pay down the debt as you go. Attached to the ordinance is the debt service schedule that you saw in Jamie's presentation, form of a loan agreement, form of a note itself, a specification of the projects, which appears on the first exhibit after the text of the ordinance, and lists such things as the Stover Road Bridge replacement and the various walking trail ramps and pedestrian walkways and so forth, the signalization project, things like that. So it's sort of all in there. A vote on the ordinance to approve it will set in motion the filing with the state. And we have timed December 19th as an expected closing date to allow us time to both get through the state approval process and work out any other finer details of the documents with M&T. M&T has not seen the drafts of the loan agreement note yet, but in my experience, these are pretty standard. I expect them to, give us some standard comments. They may or may not have counsel look at some things. We'll have some closing papers to get signed, but we'll move you right to having some cash on the table before the holidays.
Sounds good.
I will be happy to make a motion to authorize the advertisement of ordinance 2024-06.
This is approval.
Oh, it's approval.
Yeah.
You already- I'm sorry.
The ordinance has been advertised.
I make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-06.
I'll second.
Moved in second, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Chris.
Gentlemen, thank you again for the opportunity.
Have a great Thanksgiving. All right, with that, Mr. Dutkowsky, is there anything else to cover?
Nothing further except that we do need a brief executive session. That's
Very good. Executive session it is. I'll put the motion to adjourn.
Go move. Second.
Move the second, and all in favor say aye. Aye,
Aye.
opposed say nay. Motion carries.